What's going on, everyone? Anthony from Chronometer Check here, and today we're going to be taking a look at the limited edition Seiko SRPF41 Cocktail Time Presage, aka the Matcha. Now, as we get into the actual unboxing and take a little bit of a closer look at the watch itself, this watch is based off of a cocktail in Starbar Ginza in Tokyo, Japan. So one of the first things that likely immediately sticks out to you is this absolutely gorgeous dial. Now we see in the center here, the dial is sort of a light green color that sort of radiates out to a more darker forest green. And this is where it gets the name matcha from, as the matcha liqueur was actually one of the core ingredients in a specific cocktail that this watch was based off of in Starbar Ginza. Taking a closer look at the dial texture itself, and I'm doing my absolute best to keep this watch steady, I can assure you. The texture of the dial and the colors are absolutely phenomenal. The Cocktail Time lineup of Seiko's watches are essentially Seiko's way of trying to deliver the absolute best dials for as little cost as possible. And I think through this watch, they do an excellent job of sort of encapsulating that. Now keep in mind, this watch is a limited edition, limited to only 7,000, so it can be quite difficult to find, especially considering it was released at $480. You probably are going to get upsold a little bit on the secondhand market if you do decide to pick one of these up today. But along with the absolute gorgeous dial itself, we do see we have some relatively nice finishing, both on the handset, which are Dauphine hands and has some very nice finishing, as it has a half brushed and half polished surface, which kind of reflects the light very nicely. We do have Arabic numerals on even hour numerals, sort of like the Seiko Alpinist lineup, where we have it on 12, 2, 4, 6, 8, and 10. The Arabic numerals, which are pretty plainly polished, nothing really special there. However, the odd number numerals are actually luminescent and are actually raised a little bit to add a little bit of bling when you do kind of view the watch in different lighting and when the light hits it just right. Speaking of light hitting it just right, one thing about the dial, it does have sort of a luminescent quality to it, to where light hits different parts of the dial. I mean, it actually reflects and sort of illuminates that specific part of the dial, kind of making it a little bit lighter and really showing you the detail of the texture of that dial, and it's just absolutely dynamic and gorgeous. The Seiko logo itself is also applied, whereas the Presage automatic text at 6 o'clock is painted on. And although I think it's pretty clear that most of the money spent in terms of R&D and development actually went into the dial itself, all these details were done pretty crisply. Now, one of my very minor gripes with this watch is the all polished case. When we look at it from the top down, it's absolutely gorgeous. A lot of dress watches are sort of all polished. It does have a little bit of an extra blingy appeal, which, these watches being dress watches, they're not necessarily something you might be wearing every day. So the extra blinginess and flashiness isn't necessarily a big deal. But when we do have a level of polish that isn't super refined and super well done, it's not bad by any means, don't get me wrong, but when it's not, done very well, then it can have sort of chromy appearance to it, which can sort of cheapen the rest of the watch itself. Now, don't get me wrong, I do appreciate Seiko's intent to keep things simple and really put most of the emphasis on the gorgeous dial itself, as I believe is the intent of the watch, and I think they did a good job of that. But just a little gripe there. I think a little bit of brushing on the sides of the case would have went a long way in terms of elevating this watch just a bit. The case itself, again, relatively simple and streamlined, with enough distinction between the case and the bezel to kind of separate it, add a little bit of layering without really too much to detract from the dial. And the crown at the 3 o'clock position is nicely signed, and it's a very fine-toothed crown. So when you actually do go to turn it, it feels really good in the hand, very easy to operate. Hand wind, the hand winding feels pretty good, not too bad. This is a 4R35 movement. We will get into a little bit more about that in a bit. Speaking of which, the 4R35 movement can be seen through the see-through caseback, which I absolutely love. Not the most decorated movement, but that bronze or copper Seiko rotor definitely adds a little bit of flair, and just being able to see the movement is pretty cool. Now, case dimensions. This watch is very conservatively sized, which I actually like quite a bit. It's about 38.5 millimeters in diameter, about 11.8 millimeters in thickness, a lug to lug, which is very, very conservative, of 45.4 millimeters, and a lug width of 20 millimeters. Now, I think this is a watch that will absolutely suit many different wrists. Let's go ahead and throw it on the wrist, see how it actually looks. Quick wrist check. Today I'm wearing my Hamilton Khaki Field on a very nice seatbelt style NATO. I want to keep it cool and comfortable, especially as spring is sort of coming. It's getting a little bit warmer, so this is just the vibe right now. Link in the description to this piece down below. So here's the watch on my 7-inch wrist. You can see how it just wears absolutely beautifully. I mean, I think even for wrists smaller than this, it's going to work absolutely wonderfully. And I do believe this would be an excellent sort of unisex watch, both based on the dimensions that are relatively tasteful and also the relatively muted and neutral color scheme itself. Now, another thing we could see here is the strap that is included with this watch. This is sort of an olive green leather strap, which is actually quite supple, and you can see how it hugs my wrist very, very nicely. Now, personally, I'm very used to getting a little bit more affordable Seikos and kind of chucking out the strap and putting my own third-party strap on it, but I think this is an absolute perfect fit for this watch because it is a very sort of subtly textured and smooth leather, which pairs very, very nicely with the detailed dial. You know, it doesn't detract too much from it, and the olive green is quite nice and tasteful. It is a 2-stitch vintage style, which adds to the retro charm of the watch. Speaking of retro charm, we see on the wrist the box dome crystal, which is a hardlex Seiko crystal, stands up a little bit tall on the wrist, adding to the vintage charm of the watch. Seiko hardlex, very, very good, not quite as scratch resistant as something like, say, sapphire, but still quite very good, much better than a mineral or acrylic crystal. And included on the strap is a Seiko etched deployment clasp, which is actually quite well done. I mean, the action is very, very smooth, the machining is nice, it clicks into place very nice. The Seiko engraving is quite well done as well. One thing to keep in mind, it is kind of faced the other way from how we traditionally kind of wear watches in North America, at least. However, this seems to be a little bit more of a Japanese style where they will wear the tail of the strap sort of towards you, whereas typically I'm sort of used to wearing it outside. Now, the one advantage this has is it does make it so that it's a little bit less likely to get caught on things. But just because I'm a little bit not used to it, it can be a little bit just unusual at times to wear it like this. However, it's not a bad look or a bad feel by any means. So the movement we mentioned earlier is a 4R35, which is a sort of upgrade to Seiko's workhorse entry-level 7S26. Definitely not a super accurate movement by any means. However, it is rugged, durable, and resilient. Also has hacking and hand winding. So if we pull out the crown 2 clicks, we can actually stop it to hack it. Essentially what hacking is stopping the second hand when you pull out the crown. And to hand wind it, we can push it all the way in while the watch is running and just wind it forward. It feels very, very smooth, not gritty at all. And again, that fine-toothed crown just makes it absolutely a joy to wind up. So that's about it, guys. This is what I think is maybe one of the best dial watches you could possibly get for retailing under $500. Now, again, it might be a little bit difficult to actually find this watch for under $500, considering it was limited to only 7,000 pieces. But if you can get your hands on one and this dial is up your alley, which, you know, it's absolutely gorgeous, so I can't imagine why it wouldn't. But this is an absolute fantastic piece. The case isn't the most intricate, but really the attention is on the dial and the details of the dial, which it does absolutely phenomenally. So thank you so much for watching. Please do feel free to subscribe if you haven't already for more reviews and unboxings in the future. I would appreciate if you left a like. Helps feed the YouTube algorithm, and I will have a link down below to other Presage watches in case you can't get your hands on this one in the future. So thanks so much for watching. Till next time.